After voting this week, my best friend traveled with her 3-year-old to the grave of Frances Ellen Watkins Harper to put her "I voted" sticker on Harper's grave. Born in 1825, Watkins Harper was an abolitionist, a suffragist, an orator, and a member of the First Unitarian Philadelphia congregation. She ran a station of the Underground Railroad in Pennsylvania. She was a teacher, a writer, and a poet, and a woman of many firsts. The first African-American woman to publish a short story, the first woman instructor at Ohio Union Seminary for African Americans. Harper was an activist and a leader in the movements to abolish slavery and to secure women's rights, particularly the right to vote. In 1866, she gave a famous speech entitled "We Are All Bound Up Together," in which she called on the first wave women's movement to understand that because we are all bound up together, the women's movement needed to support African American suffrage as well as women's suffrage. Black women would need to have both in order to have the right to vote. A century before Kimberly Crenshaw coined the word intersectionality, Watkins Harper explained that Black women experience the double burden of racism and sexism, that they need liberation movements to hold the fullness of their experience, and at that time, work for suffrage for women and African Americans. My friend, the Reverend Abby Tennis, senior minister at First Unitarian Philadelphia today, had hoped to go to Harper's grave with her "I voted" sticker to honor Harper's legacy and celebrate the first female Black president. I don't know if you've heard of it, but there is a 17th century word, recrudescence. It means the return to something cruddy. After a brief period of respite, recrudescence. I am still processing this week and trying to make sense of what happens now. Grief makes sense. Grief and all of its children: rage, sorrow, confusion, exhaustion, disorientation. Grief takes time, and there is no amount of pep talks or urgency or shame or blame that will change what has happened. Grief takes presence and patience and care. We practice grieving in a congregational context. We practice feeling our feelings and caring for one another. So practice, dear ones. Practice feeling your feelings, practice showing up for what is true now, and practice caring for one another, for your own bodies and spirits, for your children, for your loved ones. I also want to name that fear is alive right now in our community and in this country. And as a community, we hold one another in fear. We hold one another in care, and we remain firm in our defense and our protection of the people. We know that threats are more pointed at some members of our community. For our trans and our immigrant beloveds in particular, this is a frightening time. Beloveds, know that we will fight to defend your rights and your safety. We also know that there are specific threats to Black people, to queer people, to people of color, to women. Beloveds, you are not alone. We are here together in community, in care, and in protection. You are embedded in this specific community of care and in the larger Unitarian Universalist networks of care that will fight like hell for your rights and for your safety. Most importantly, dear ones, know that you are beloved. This election was not a referendum on your worth. That is inherent. Your value is inherent. You are sacred and beloved and worthy. We are not giving up. Though we may be in the wilderness, we will not let it make us weary. The fight will go on, and there will be meetings and organizing and strategy. Trust. But right now, we can take a breath and attend to our nervous systems, attend to our hearts and our loved ones, so that we can continue to be part of what is a long-haul movement, a long-haul struggle, a long-haul labor for change. We need to be present to one another, to process, to feel our feelings, to listen and to love. We need to care for our bodies and our spirits so that we can come back to this story, to this struggle that we are just in the middle of. It's the middle of this story. And we cannot come back to it. We cannot come back to the good fight if we get sick or if we suppress our feelings and push them into a dark corner or convert them into anxiety. So now we do the work to feel, to process, and to remember who we are, beloved, and what we do, love. In the 1970s and 1980s, a church in San Diego was experiencing an increase in crime and in vandalism in their neighborhood. They had the classic conversations that churches who are experiencing that often go through: mission versus moving, working for change where they are versus leaving for somewhere easier. This congregation in San Diego, it was called Christ the King Congregation, and outside of their church they had a life-size statue of Jesus with his hands outstretched like this. Hands outstretched to welcome the stranger, to invite in the oppressed. That statue symbolized to the congregation the open arms of love to the whole and the holy of the world. One night, some people vandalized the congregation, vandalized the church, and they broke off the outstretched hands of Jesus. It was a plaster statue. When members of the congregation returned to their church and found the symbol of their faith vandalized in that way, they were heartbroken. For them, Jesus' outstretched hands were doing the work of love and welcome in the world. And it was that connection with the world and the hope of building a better world that was broken. Church members considered giving up. They considered leaving, just moving somewhere better, somewhere safer, somewhere their hope and their connection would not be threatened in this way, wouldn't be broken in this way. The community debated what to do. Some suggested fixing the statue, painting over the broken parts, going on and pretending like nothing had happened, trying to be the church of yesterday that had never been hurt, that had never been broken. But as they talked about it and they thought about it and they lived with the reality of that brokenness together, they made an entirely different decision. A decision that I'm up here preaching about 40 years later. They created and placed a sign at the base of the statue of Jesus with his hands broken off that read, "No hands but yours." No hands but yours. The statue then became a symbol not just of the church's work in the world, but of the people's work of love in the world. It's not the holy, or not just the holy, that's reaching out into the world and welcoming the stranger and inviting in the oppressed. It is the work of the people to do that. No hands but yours. It is our work to do that. The people's work, the world's work. The statue's broken off hands became not a symbol of cruelty or of love being cut off from the world, but rather a symbol of love's need to work through everyday human hands of all the people living in the community. The church realized that the work of love was never about the figurehead, the one at the top, the symbol. Rather, the work of love, it's about us. It's about the community that gathers here today, the people in front of us right here, right now. Regardless of what happens to the symbol at the top, the work of the world is in front of us, no hands but ours to do it. On Wednesday this week, we opened the church. We had a minister in the sanctuary all day, and we just opened the doors for people to come in, sit, grieve, process, talk, whatever they needed to do. We had about 30 people that came through during the day and either sat quietly here in the sanctuary or gathered in the common room to talk and reflect. A couple of our members showed up just to support other people in the community and connect. Someone brought cookies to share. Then on Wednesday evening, we had maybe 35 people gather for a short Vespers service and then small group processing. And once again, people held one another. People gathered and told their stories and shared their fears, created new connections, and had someone there to hold them. They picked up one another's burdens to carry. We passed out comfort shawls from our shawl ministry, people who are sitting in the common room regularly on Sundays, knitting comfort for folks in our community that are struggling. On Thursday night this week, our anti-racism team gathered and processed, and in that gathering of planning anti-racist action in this church, it was our 2 teenage members who gave me the most hope, sharing their reflections on time and change and the small joys of connection that sustained them. Sometimes our faith practice is big practice, big movement work, the power and the beauty of our Defend Democracy team who informed and registered and galvanized and rescued thousands of voters. And other times, the work of the faith community is in smaller acts of caring, of showing up for one another, of bringing in the comfort cookies, of carrying someone else's worry for the week, of listening to the fears of our hearts. These small acts of care and courage carry us from the dark night of the soul and back into the land of the living, the land of organizing and resisting and once again walking into the future. This story is not over. This week we had one battle, one contraction, one episode in a long labor, a long struggle for a better world. We are still in that story, the long one. And I want you to remember that half the country is ready, is excited for a Black woman president. The people that you see around you stuttering and suffering and grieving and scared this week are all people who are with you and who are ready and are excited to move into that beautiful, better future we are building. In 2013, Rebecca Solnit wrote, "The future is bigger than our imaginations. It's unimaginable, and then it comes anyway. To meet it, we need to keep going, to walk past what we can imagine. And here's what it takes. You don't stop walking. You don't stop walking to congratulate yourself. You don't stop walking to wallow in despair. You don't stop because your own life got too comfortable or too rough. You don't stop because you won. You don't stop because you lost. You don't stop walking because there is no way forward, because you walk the path into being. You look backwards to grasp the long history that you're moving forward from, the paths that other people have made so we could be here, the road that we came in on, and then you look forward to possibility and you make that path. That's what we mean by hope. But mostly, you just walk. Right foot, left foot, right foot, left foot. In 1858, the Anti-Slavery Bugle published Watkins Harper's poem, "Bury Me in a Free Land." The poem begins, "Make me a grave wherever you will, in a lowly plain or a lofty hill. Make it among the earth's humblest graves, but not in a land where men are slaves." Harper closes the poem. "I ask no monument, proud and high, to arrest the gaze of passers-by. All that my yearning spirit craves is bury me not in a land of slaves." Slavery was abolished in the United States in 1865 with the 13th Amendment, and when Frances Ellen Watkins Harper died in 1911, she was not buried in a land of slaves. Harper worked her entire life for the abolition of slavery and for the rights of women and African American people to vote. She died before women's suffrage, but in her lifetime, she witnessed the end of slavery and African American gaining the right to vote with the 15th Amendment. The 19th Amendment, granting women the right to vote, passed 9 years after Harper's death in 1920. In our lifetimes, we get to see some of the dreams we yearn for. Other dreams will be realized by our children or our grandchildren, by the dreamers and the doers who come after us and carry on our work. The story isn't over. And we are still here today, carrying our dreams in our hands and our hearts, those hearts that are so beautiful and bright and shining and beloved. Nothing can take that away. Dear ones, may we do the work of feeling now, of caring for one another, of processing, and then may we pick up the work of those dreams and keep walking together into the future. May it be so.